What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my YouTube channel, and welcome to this video, my top 10 Twilight Zone episodes. Now, Twilight Zone was created by Rod Serling. It ran for 5 seasons. It ran from 1959 to 1964, and it was the biggest TV series of that time during that era. Now, I do want to say, I absolutely loved this show. I grew up watching it because this is a great show. Now, season 1 ran from 1959 to 1960. Season 2 was 1960 to 1961. Season 3 was 1961 to 1962. Season 4 was 1963. And Season 5 was 1963 to 1964. Now, if you see me looking at my screen, it's because I have little anecdotes that I made about each episode, and we're going to start off with number 10. Number 10 of my top 10 Twilight Zone episodes is a Game of Pool, which was part of season 3 and was episode 5. Now, the interesting aspect of this episode was that it starred Jack Klugman, who you remember from The Odd Couple, and comedian Jonathan Winters, who was also a drama actor at the time as well. Now, it tells the story of Jesse Cardiff, who is more so of a pool player, and he wants to be the biggest pool player of all time, and he says, "Oh, I can beat that guy," and evidently the guy's name is Fats, played by Jonathan Winters. There was a lot of pool players back in the day called Fats. Of course, you know the biggest one, Minnesota Fats, that Jackie Gleason played in The Hustler. And this was a really interesting episode because it's about life or death. If Jesse Cardiff, Jack Klugman, can beat Fats, then, you know, he gets to live his life longer. But if Fats beats Jesse, it's an interesting aspect of how it's done. It's somewhat to notice for people that it's not really a good episode of the Twilight Zone because nothing scary or nothing interesting happens at all. But it's the factor of knowing what's going to happen in the end. If you know about how the Twilight Zone episodes are between the life and death situations of their stories. Both Jack Klugman and Jonathan Winters give great performances, and there are a lot of people out there who are younger than me that do not know these episodes. They all know the Twilight Zones from the 90s, the redo, the 80s, and then the recent one that Jordan Peele created. Different aspects and different stories are redone, but changed in a way. I always like the aspect of the original, and this game of pool is really good. It touches on the life and death aspect of things and how, if you want to go for something, you have to go for it. And the ending is really interesting, but then yet for Jesse, it's just like he has to continue what he's doing over and over again, while Fats just, lays back and actually enjoys life in a different way. So my number 10 top 10 episode of Twilight Zone is A Game of Pool from season 3, which is episode 5. My number 9 Twilight Zone episode on my top 10 list is The Obsolete Man, which was season 2, episode 29, and starred Burgess Meredith as Romney Wordsworth. Now, this is a really interesting episode because it changes the aspect of what you understand and what the obsolete man is. Burgess Meredith was a big actor at the time, a huge actor. Of course, you all may know him from playing the Penguin in the Batman TV series that starred Adam West. Now, the obsolete man is pretty interesting because the character is put on trial for being obsolete because he is an occupation of a librarian, and as a librarian it's punishable by the state, and this is taking place in a totalitarian state. If you know the totalitarian state of stories, it's like 1984, which George Orwell wrote. Now, they took some inspiration from that as well. Books are eliminated, but then Wordsworth is kind of interesting because he believes in God, a proof of adolescence, and as the state claims to have proven, God does not exist. Well, over the course of the time, due to his cowardly display in certain aspects of how things are done, the Chancellor is replaced by his own sub people in a way and declared obsolete himself. And he protests against this and tries to escape, but is overwhelmed by his tribunal attendees, who then do something interesting. Uh, it's really, really fun because this episode was also written by Rod Serling, and the aspect of the acting in this was really good. The Obsolete Man always makes everyone's top 10 list, and as you can see, it's made my list. I love the aspect of the acting, the aspect of the close-ups, the lighting. You see the Chancellor on, you know, the big stoop that he's standing on, overlooking the character of Wordsworth and Burgess Meredith. And well, Burgess Meredith is being looked down upon from an upshot angle, or the Dutch angle, which wasn't called the Dutch angle back then. But the aspect of the story is good, and you can tell that he just wanted to be that person, a librarian who just reads and reads and reads. And, it was fun. It originally aired in June of 1961 during a big time during politics, so you could say that there was kind of a big thing with communism and the Soviet power at hand and how certain things were done. But it was interesting and fun, which is why The Obsolete Man is number 9 on my list. Number 8 on my list of top 10 Twilight Zone episodes is Living Doll. Yes, it comes from season 5, episode 6, and it tells the story of a dysfunctional family or family problem, and it stars Telly Savalas. You may know Telly Savalas for playing Kojak and Blofeld in one of the James Bond films back in the day. Now, he plays Eric Strader, Mary LaRoche is Annabelle Strader, and Tracy Stratford is Christy Strader. Now, it tells the story of a young girl who gets a doll named Talkie Tina. And to the little girl, it's just normal talking. But to the father, he sees things. He's like, I'm Talkie Tina. I'm going to kill you. Excuse me, what was that again? You could tell this was like the first iteration of a possessed doll episode of any kind of a TV series, show for that matter, or even a movie for that matter. The interesting aspect for this, and I always say it because I love the way it's done, and when you mention this to people, their eyes open up. Since this is about dolls and everything, the wife's name is Annabelle. Yeah, of course we know the name Annabelle is synonymous with the Warrens and the Raggedy Ann doll and the slew of Conjuring movies that feature Annabelle the doll. Well, Annabelle is not called the doll in this. The doll's name is Talkie Tina. There are aspects in this where it's just unnerving and unreckless, and the character of the father, played by Telly Savalas, is just in your face and scared. He doesn't know what to do. So all the while, like the the aspect of how the episode progresses is interesting because the doll just antagonizes over and over. The father's like, I don't like you. I'm going to kill you, this and that. And the father's like, turn the doll off. I was like, what are you talking about? What's happening? The father tells the mother, listen, this is not, it doesn't believe it. Throws it in a trash can, looks at it, and it's gone. Okay, what happens next? An interesting aspect in the ending, and it's just the father falls down the steps because of the doll. And then you think, I guess you would think, and he dies. Well, he does in my eyes. And then while Annabelle goes up to the doll, picks it up, he's like, I'm talking Tina. You better be nice to me. Okay. So it's really interesting how the aspect of something like this, of doll possession, and how a child's doll could prove to be scary. Who would think a doll like this would be scary? I mean, you got porcelain dolls, you got stuffed animal dolls, stuff like that are just really interesting. But for me, this was the aspect of horror. I mean, Twilight Zone is horror, sci-fi, mixed with interesting aspects of coming of age, drama, thriller type. But for me, I mean, they waited up until the 5th season to premiere this episode. And if they premiered it maybe season 1 or 2, would have had more of an effect. But they waited around 1963, and it was just insane. So number 8 on my list is Living a Doll from season 5, episode 6. Number 7 on my list is Nick of Time, which was season 2, episode 7. It starred William Shatner and Patricia Breslin, and it tells the story of newlyweds Don and Pat Carter, whose car kind of breaks down in Ridgeview, Ohio, in a way, en route to New York City so they can have their honeymoon, I believe. So while their car's getting repaired, they go into the Busy Bee Cafe and they sit at one of the booths, and sitting next and to the booth is this kind of contraption, I want to say, where you put money into it, push the button, and a fortune comes out. But it has like a devil's head on it. And the way the design was done is interesting. Now, like I said, it's a fortune teller machine, but and it's only for yes or no questions, and it's only a penny each. Can you imagine that? A penny each to get your wish or your fortune told. Well, Don kind of asked this one question in a way, and in a way where he's like, "Will my car get repaired?" And Don puts a coin in, presses the button, and it says, "The odds are ever in your favor." He's like, "Okay," and then someone comes like, "Oh, your car's done." It wasn't even that long, and I believe they order a sandwich with no crust, and I believe Coca-Cola or something like that, and uh, and then he asks like, "Will I get this promotion at my job?" Because he's like, "Yes, you will." So Don calls the office and he finds out that he got this promotion at his job. So all the while it's going and going, and Don doesn't want to leave. He's like attracted to this fortune telling machine. And the interesting thing about this episode is that William Shatner plays Don, a young William Shatner. I mean, seeing William Shatner play someone in a different thing other than James T. Kirk, on Star Trek is great. The aspect of this is more of the storytelling part and how creepy it is at times, where you put your money into and your idea of just having your fortune told and going by that. I mean, people flip a coin and give it a 50-50 chance on life. Be like, all right, if it's heads, I'm going to do this. If it's tails, I won't do this. But how this was done was interesting because it just takes the factor away of what that rush is. And you could say that Don was kind of possessed by this machine while his wife is just like, no, come on, let's go. I don't believe this stuff. He's like, no, you don't understand. This could make us or break us. So the aspect of the emotion is really good, but then the fear and craziness of the superstition kicks in as well as you're watching. It's like, okay, could something like this be real? If it's not, then what? It leaves your mind open to interpretation of how things are done and how you perceive things that are going to be. I mean, it's interesting because it's like, oh, it's a little diner in Ridgeview, Ohio. Okay, what can happen in a little diner area like that? In Ohio somewhere, or any other part on a long highway route, like Route 66 for that matter. You stop in a diner, you see this little thing, you're going to put a coin in. I was like, okay, what's going to happen? And then your life starts changing. It's really interesting, and it's interesting how it was done. I like the pacing because it was like in one edited setting. Like in a way, it was just in a diner, but then it was also outside and inside. And only Don and his newlywed wife, Pat, saw this. Nobody else. So the interesting thing about the ending is that it's fun. It's leaves it to your own interpretation, which is why Nick of Time is a number 7 on my list. Number 6 on my list is To Serve Man. Yes, that episode. It's season 3, episode 24, and it basically kind of tells the story of the government seeing this new spacecraft arrive with this big human being, and we don't know what's happening. And this has made everybody's list over and over again because it's just that good of an episode. And it was written by Rod Serling. And the interesting aspect of this episode is that it starts off with the character where he's in a room on a cot. I believe his name is, my God, what was his name? Michael, I believe. And he works for the government. And he's trying to figure out stuff. And this thing comes on the speaker, says, "You should eat. You should really eat because you need your energy." It's like, no. And then we go into the story of what's happening with the backstory. So basically, the setting changes several months earlier to Earth, where we find out that the Canamites, Canamites, I believe, or if that was the name, are this land on Earth as the planet for international crises. They want to, they're trying to decipher certain things. They have this book. We don't know what this book is. The interesting aspect is that Richard Keel is plays one of the Canamites, or the alien for that matter. I call it the alien, which is much easier to understand than the Canamites. And the United States hires this guy Michael to be a cryptographer or a cryptographer, but he's pressed into this job because he has to get this done by a certain time. While that's happening, they make this assumption to these Canamites or Canamites, aliens for that matter, to make it it's like, oh, we're gonna something's gonna happen to Earth, but we're gonna send you to our planet. It's much better. It's nicer. The beaches are there, and things will be happy, free, and fun. And as they're boarding the ship, people are boarding the ship. One of the assistants, or this to Michael, named Patty, I believe, runs out and he says, "Michael, don't get on there. Don't get on there. To serve man. It's a cookbook. It's a cookbook to show you how to cook humans." Michael is thrown onto the spaceship, and then it closes, and that's where we get into the aspect of the beginning, where the voice offers him a meal, and through a small aspect in a window. But then there really doesn't make any much difference because he's hungry, so he eats, and the episode closes on, and he gives in, and he stops his hunger strike, so he starts to eat people too. It's a really morbid episode in a way, but morbid to the fact where you didn't expect this twist ending. It's probably one of the most interesting twist endings in a Twilight Zone episode ever, I believe, because as you're watching it, you can't help but anytime it's on. And I believe Sci-Fi Channel does a Twilight Zone marathon, a 24-hour Twilight Zone marathon, every year on New Year's Day. So I don't know, they jump around with different seasons and episodes, but sometimes they run through all, seasons in a quick fashion somehow, or for that New Year's Day weekend. And To Serve Man is always playing. And whenever it's on, watch it. If you haven't seen it, watch it. Because it's great, and the final twist is just, whoa. I mean, I could just imagine people back in 1962, I believe March of 1962, watching this episode and being like, oh, what? Because 1962, 1950s, we're at the time of the UFOs, the spaceships, aliens, what could happen, it was a big thing. It was a big, big thing. And this final thing was absolutely fantastic, which is why To Serve Man is number 6 on my list. Number 5 on my list is Walking Distance, which was season 1, episode 5. And this episode was written by Rod Serling, and it made a lot of top lists of everyone's Twilight Zone episodes, which is why it's number 5. I didn't know where to place it because there were so many good episodes of the Twilight Zone, but I want to say that Gig Young is Martin Sloan, and he goes into this, a area where he needs to have his car serviced at a gas station. So within walking distance of his hometown, he walks to a local pop shop that serves ice cream floats, I believe, and or ice cream sodas for that matter. And he looks around. It's like he knows nothing has changed, and it's the ice cream soda. It's like, okay, what happened? And the guy says it's only 10 cents. He's like, really? So he goes to see, and then Martin walks to the town park, and as he's walking to the town park, he's startled to see himself as a young boy. Approaches the young boy, but returning, and Martin becomes scared, believing himself to be in some sort of trouble, and he runs away. So he jumps down, and he hurts his leg. He's like, oh God, his leg. And then, but you can tell that Martin Sloan has had a bit of a limp or a walk. And you can tell that that's the way he injured himself when he was a young boy. And he's confused and worried. Martin wanders around town and ends up at his former home again, where he again tries to convince his parents who he is by showing his identification, but he's older and they don't believe him. And it's just an interesting aspect of how things are done about if you went back to your hometown not seeing anything changed. You see yourself as a young boy or a girl. What do you think's going to happen? What do you think you're going to do? You know, like, will you be scared? Will you not be scared? It's the aspect of coming of age, but somewhere in his life, he's looking for that sanity. Like, he's like older, he doesn't know what to do. But I feel like it was his way or some ever way, whatever dimension he walked through, was the way of telling him, like, okay, what you're doing now, you're very appreciative of it, but certain things could happen. Like the aspect of him going back to his old home and him being slapped by his mother. Like, that's so degrading. Like, you're trying to tell your mom, this is me, but I'm older. She just smacks you across the face. Like, what? So basically, Martin goes back into the drugstore where he started in the beginning of the ice cream soda, which was 10 cents, which is now 35 cents. And he discovers that he now has a limp from his carousel injury. And not only that, he makes his way back to the gas station to pick up his car. And he drives away, knowing that he's content for once in his life, and he's part of his own so-called age group. It's like the age part where he's like, he's older, but you're still a kid in your mind and at heart. Everyone's still a kid at heart, even in their mind. It doesn't matter what happens. But for Martin Sloan and for the Twilight Zone viewing audience back in 1959, when this first season came out, which was episode 5, I think it was Halloween Eve, if I'm not mistaken, um, October 30th, 1959. It was really, really interesting. It was really scary because it takes place before Halloween. What other way could you scare someone or adults by showing this episode? The acting by Gig Young was great. Gig Young was a prolific actor back in the day, and he starred in amazing movies and TV shows. And seeing him in a Twilight Zone episode was really good, especially for it being the earliest of episodes in for that season. So, which is why Walking Distance is number 5 on my list. Number 4 on my list is Eye of the Beholder, which is season 2, episode 6. This was written by Rod Serling, and I feel like anytime Rod Serling writes an episode of The Twilight Zone, it's going to be amazing and in your face. Basically, The Eye of the Beholder tells the story of Janet Tyler, who undergoes surgery, so many times in an attempt to look normal. Surgery's done, but the bandages are all on her face, and we don't see her face at all. But the doctors and nurses are all in the shadows, and we can't see if they're normal people or not. So as the aspect of the story, as the episode is going on, it goes on, and then when the bandages are removed, we find out to our viewer, the audience, she's a beautiful woman. But then the doctors and nurses come out of the shadows because they're going to give her a sedative, and we find out that the doctors and nurses are actually the ones that are ugly, grotesque creatures with pig snouts, big eyes, crinkled faces. I mean, it's a shocking, shocking episode. And it has to do with the aspect of finding beauty. What do you perceive as beauty? What do you perceive as ugly? Because the aspect of this back in the day is kind of, I believe, season 2, episode 6 was 1960, I believe. And episode 6 was around November of that time. And the interesting thing about that is that, beauty standards back in the day are very, very much different than they were now in today's world. Because you have all these social media things going on, nobody understood. We had the magazines, the models, you wanted to look great a certain way. You want to make yourself look like a celebrity. Okay. But for how Janet wanted to look, she was already beautiful. And, Maxine Stewart, who plays Janet, is interesting, but then Donna Douglas, who plays Janet unmasked, is really different. Two different actresses played the role differently because under the bandages it was one actress, and when we see the face, it's a different actress. So then you think to yourself, like, So they kind of did that in real life. Like, we don't know what the actress under it looked like, but when we show it to you, it's a different person. So they kind of played you with your mind tricks as well. And when you see these grotesque images, it's like interesting because not only that, not only is it known for the aspect of finding out that you're beautiful, but everybody else around you is interesting. It's really weird because eventually a handsome man, again by viewer standard, someone named Walter in this episode, arrives to take the crying Janet away to so-called exile area, I want to say, or something, for her own kind, or wherever her ugliness shows. Like, for them, crying is ugly, but then they themselves look ugly because they have a pig snout in the face. Great episode, great twist ending. Now, not only that, the season 2, episode 6 show of American Horror Stories also took inspiration from this episode, Eye of the Beholder. That starred Judith Light, who was really into beauty, cosmetics, always wanted to look young. She meets this doctor. Okay, fine. She gets surgery. Then what happens? She unmasks, and she's the one that looks like a pig, has the hands of a boar or a pig. And she's the one that's ugly. Well, everybody else is beautiful. So they took this episode, but they really reversed it in a different way, which was interesting because the aspect of knowing that this was season 2, episode 6 of the Twilight Zone, while American Horror Stories, called Facelift, was season 2, episode 6. So I think they did that on purpose, but it was a good thing that they did that. But with Eye of the Beholder, it's one of those where it always makes the top 10 list of anything, and which is why it made mine, because it's really the aspect of the beauty standards and understanding ugly beauty. But sometimes, beauty is only skin deep. And, you can be beautiful on the outside, but you can be a bitch on the inside, or vice versa. It's really interesting how everything worked in this, but it was so, so good, which is why number 4 on my list is Eye of the Beholder. Number 3 on my list is Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, which was season 5, episode 3. Anytime anybody remembers this episode, they think of William Shatner, and it's really, really good. The episode was written by Richard Matheson and not Rod Serling, like some people think. Now, William Shatner plays Bob Wilson, while Christine White plays Julia Wilson. Now, it basically tells the story of a man, or a story of a passenger on an airplane who notices a creature or some being around the wing of an airplane while it is in flight. Of course, you know that the Twilight Zone movie did this with John Lithgow's character, and that was more so of a scary version of it, more horror, but this was more so of a psychological horror. Granted, this was season 5, episode 3. That's how long it took. It took until the final season for this episode to, happen. And the interesting aspect is that it's a very short episode. Very, very short. It's about 25 minutes in length without commercials. And it premiered in a time where October, I want to say, of 1963, I believe. I believe October 1963 or 64. I don't want to be mistaken about that. But the aspect is, like, he keeps seeing something on the wing. Calls over the flight attendant. She doesn't believe him. They don't believe him. All of a sudden, he keeps going. All of a sudden, the creature, comes up to the window, and he sees the creature, and he just starts freaking out. And it's just, interesting because we see damage to the airplane wing, and he was right all along. Something caused it. But, what happens? And, we find out that Bob Wilson, or Robert, or however you want to call the name of the character, he was right all along. He wasn't insane. He wasn't crazy. It wasn't in his mind. They put the notion in a perspective of someone's flying in the air. How can they cope with that? By making up an imaginary thing for them to be occupied with, by looking out of a window for the entire duration of a flight, which is insane. I mean, if you're up in the air at 20,000 feet and you see a creature on the wing, what are you going to do? You don't know what you're going to do. But now with cell phones, I'm pretty sure anything is possible. But still, you really can't take a picture through a window if it's nighttime or anything. But, I mean, God forbid, who knows what's going to happen. This has been redone many times as well in newer versions of the Twilight Zone. And it goes to show, like, how different aspects are done. The fear of flying, like I said, is a big proponent in how this is done, which is really, really different and interesting. Not all the while that William Shatner gives a great performance. One of his other episodes, Nick of Time, also made my list. And, William Shatner was tremendous and is a tremendous actor. And seeing him do TV shows was good up until Star Trek. And Star Trek really propelled him into the stratosphere of becoming a household name. And, if you've never seen Nightmare at 20,000 Feet, what are you doing? It's one of my favorites, and it was really hard to figure out where to put this on my list, which is why it was number 3 on my list. Number 2 on my list is Time Enough at Last, which was season 1, episode 8, and it premiered November of 1959, and it stars Burgess Meredith as a so-called bank teller and bookworm in a way, as he plays Henry Bemis, and it's basically based off the short story of the same name by Lynn Venable. And Burgess Meredith's other episode, The Obsolete Man, was also on my list. Now, I do like this episode for what it is because it's an aspect of one of the most famous episodes of The Twilight Zone because it's so synonymous because it was part of season 1. Everyone remembers season 1 of The Twilight Zone. They had some amazing, phenomenal stories. Episode 8, this one, being that one. Now, the interesting thing about this episode is that it basically tells the story of Henry, who is doing his job, but he always loves to read books. He gets lost in books, but he always keeps getting interrupted. And he has these big glasses on that make his eyes look big so he can see what he's reading. And anytime he's trying to read, he gets interrupted. But then it also follows the character in a post-apocalyptic world. The world around him gets destroyed for some reason. And then as it gets destroyed, he finds that, oh my God, things happened. This was the time of the atomic bomb. Panic in the streets of the USA and the entire world in the 1950s and 60s. I mean, they really know what they were doing when they put panic in in people's hearts and just scared the shit out of them with fear. But then, as the episode progresses, you have a telephone that's connected to nothingness or nothing at all. And, the aspect of how things are done is he, in a shocking way, he finds a revolver and wants to commit suicide. Yeah. But then he sees the ruins of a public library in the distance. And this is basically based off of, that movie, The Last Man on Earth, or I Am Legend, you can say. So he does that, and the books he could ever hope for, he could read, and he has enough time at last. But then his glasses break. Yeah, and he can't read the books that he wants to read. It's one of the most heartbreaking episodes I've ever seen. And it's probably one of the craziest because he has all this time and all of a sudden his glasses break. And he keeps saying, "No, that's not fair. That's not fair." And then it just ends. It's a great episode, but the loneliness of how things are done is interesting. The aspect of things are done is interesting. And Burgess Meredith gives a stunning performance. The aspect of knowing that you have so much time enough at last, but then everything's gone. You're the last man on earth. You get to do anything you want. It's like that one short story. You know you're the only man on earth, but then all of a sudden there's a knock at your door. Do you open it? Like, it's insane, and I love it, which is why Time Enough at Last is number 2 on my list. Number 1 on my list is The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street, Season 1, Episode 22, which premiered March of 1960. Now, this is a really interesting episode. It's full of children playing, adults talking, and it has a slew of actors in this, from Claude Atkins to Barry Atwater, Jack Weston, Burt Metcalf, Amzie Strickland, and Barton. The list goes on, and I had to read that on my anecdote because, you really forget who these amazing actors are of the yesteryear. Now, as things are happening, there is like certain things going on in around the area. And I think it's a meteor, but then everything is shut off. The power, the neighborhood, they all meet in the middle of the street trying to figure out what's happening. Chaos ensues. We don't know what's happening. But then by the end of the episode, and I don't want to give the spoiler away because if you haven't seen it, you'll be very surprised. Something happens. But the big aspect and what this so-called episode is about is McCarthyism and the Cold War, who to trust, who not to trust, who's real, who's fake, who's not real. It's just a position of how things are done in this episode. I mean, who are the monsters on Maple Street? Is it this meteor or this thing that crashed? Or is it the people that are living amongst one another? It's really interesting how things are done. And, you could say that Maple Street is one of those, it's like a cul-de-sac, you know people, you know things, but it's really interesting because, of course, Rod Serling wrote it, and it's a good episode, but how everything was done based on how one of the characters, Tommy, reads about an alien invasion happening, really opens your eyes like, okay, is it a meteor, is it an alien invasion? Is it the mind of the civilians? What goes on in the distance, what happens, who can you trust, who can't you trust? The psychological aspect of this is really good, especially how the actors portrayed their roles. I mean, being season 1, episode 22, of course, it put fear into America back in the day during March of 1960. Rod Serling knew what he was doing. He took the fear of everyday life and he turned it into a TV show. And that's what you got, the Twilight Zone. And which is why number 1 on my list is The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. So let me know in the comment section below what you thought about my top 10 Twilight Zone episodes. Did you like it? Did you not like it? What did you think of it? Did you agree or disagree with it? What are your top 10 Twilight Zone episodes? And did some of your favorites make my list? If not, let me know in the comment section below which ones are your favorite. And do you still think the original Twilight Zone, directed by and starring, and which was created by Rod Serling from 1959 to 1964, which ran for 5 seasons, is still the best one? Or do you like any of the redo versions from, I believe, the 80s, 90s, the 2000s, and the current one, which was recently released by Jordan Peele? Let me know in the comment section below about all of the questions I just asked, and also let me know and give me your top 10 in the comment section below. Thank you for tuning into my top 10 list of Twilight Zone episodes, and I'll see you all in the next video.